Lawfare, the strategic use of legal systems and institutions to damage, delegitimize, or silence opponents, typically under the guise of due process, public order, or justice. In modern Britain and the wider West, lawfare has become the tool of choice, not to protect citizens, but to control them, not to uphold freedom, but to punish those who use it. Take Julian Assange, a journalist hounded, imprisoned, and silenced, not for lying, but for exposing uncomfortable truths. Truths that embarrassed the powerful. Andrew Tate, now formally charged in the UK with serious offences including rape, human trafficking, and controlling prostitution for gain, charges that, regardless of their outcome, serve to tarnish and neutralise. And then there's Russell Brand, officially charged and now facing the prosecution in the British courts, years after the alleged incident, but just in time to ensure his influence is neutralised, his platform silenced, and his character permanently stained. Each of these men is different, but each is a target, and each has been dragged through legal hell not simply for what they've done, but for who they are and what they represent. This is lawfare. Prosecution as a message. Allegation as punishment. The legal system is not used to protect society, but to protect the narrative. But now, in Britain, we're witnessing lawfare take a new and disturbing turn. A man comes to this country seeking sanctuary, fleeing persecution, looking for freedom. And what does he find? He finds freedom, true freedom, has no home here either. He burns a Quran, a provocative act, yes, but peaceful, symbolic, protected in any nation that truly believes in free speech. But instead of defending that right, the corrupt British state chooses to prosecute him, not for harm, not for hatred, but for offence. He is now being dragged through the courts, not because of what he did, but because of what it represented. And while he stands trial, it's the British people who are being judged. This is lawfare, and its target is our freedom. A clear warning for all of us. Challenge the new orthodoxy and you will be punished. Not by mob justice, but by the state. Not in Iran, not in China, but here in Britain in 2025.
Today I'm in central London outside Westminster Magistrates Court. I've just spent the last 3 hours inside there listening to the trial of a Turkish citizen, but now resident of the United Kingdom, Turkish individual called Coskun. Now, Coskun was born in 1974 and he dared to have the audacity to come to central London from Derby, which is where he was living. He came down to central London and he went straight to the Turkish consulate in Knightsbridge. This is where he decided to burn the Quran.
God, the man's come out with a knife. The man's come out with a knife now. Boss, look here, look.
Go for me.
Look. God, he's got a knife. Go.
Idiot.
It was his stand against Islam. His family are from Kurdish origins, and his family over the years have been persecuted and in some cases murdered by fanatical Islamists.
You've argued that Erdogan has been very successful in the way in which he has used religion in order to consolidate his power and minimize the role of the Kurds in the Turkish state. How has he done that?
That the Turkish state actually aided the creation, foundation of religious terrorist groups that would attack the PKK or secular Kurdish forces in the region, or it has aided them in various ways. So it has used Islamic conservatism in its fight against the secular Kurdish movements.
Quite contrary to the stories you hear about Turkey in terms of its secularism.
So you would probably come to understand that this man has a slight gripe against the religion of Islam, the idea that is Islam. He doesn't like the Quran and he has studied it for most of his life, trying to understand it. So he has a pretty good idea about what Islam is about. But in this country that is led by here Stalin, we now have this situation where blasphemy laws are coming back. Jerry Springer brought the case where the ability to criticize Christianity, which would lead to blasphemy laws being overturned in the United Kingdom. From 2008, this country finally had the right to express their disdain for religion and all religions. But in 2025, we now have the situation where through the back door, through Westminster Magistrates Court, they are potentially going to criminalize you criticizing an idea, the idea that is Islam. The idea that if you buy a copy of the Quran and you choose to burn it in a public space, you will be criminalized. This is what this institution is arguing for at the moment, and it's being led by a number of individuals from the CPS. So the government, the Crown, is seeking to persecute this Turkish individual who has been persecuted his entire life by Islamists. He has seen all around him the damage they can do to society. It was he decided to go to the Turkish consulate because he was taking a stand against Erdogan, who he believes pushing for a Turkish caliphate, implementing Sharia laws. For his entire existence, the Kurds in Turkey have been prosecuted, murdered by Islamists. This has happened since he was born in 1974, and it continues to happen. So you can understand his frustration. Now, I'm going to go back into the court at 2 o'clock to see the outcome of this trial. Now, this trial was only supposed to take an hour. It turns out the prosecution have changed their argument. Now they realize it would have been thrown out if they said, right, we want to prosecute you because you dared to insult Islam. Now they're prosecuting him for a public nuisance. Well, think about that. Think about all of the protesters that come through London on a weekly basis who are fairly disorderly in their conduct, shouting expletives into the street. Are they prosecuted? Well, if this man is found guilty, the outcome for all protests will be, you will be found guilty. It's dark dystopian times, and I really hope that this man is found not guilty, because for all our sake, everyone should be able to criticize Islam, criticize Christianity, criticize Buddhism, criticize Hinduism, because if you can't criticize an idea, then are we truly free? I don't think so. Freedom is the ability to criticize ideas and to also do as you want onto your property. If I have a book that I want to burn, it might be a copy of Batman, the Chronicles of Batman. If I want to burn it and it's causing no damage to anyone else, I should be able to burn it. And the same goes for the Bible, the same goes for the Torah, and the same goes for the Quran. The difference being, if you burn the Quran in the 21st century, the religious fanatics will come after you. We've already had a man in Sweden who was gunned down for daring to burn the Quran. The Swedish didn't protect him. We've had the Charlie Hebdo massacre, where they dared publish a cartoon picture of Muhammad. They were gunned down. We should not tolerate these fanatics. Everyone that said "Je suis Charlie" and uttered it or muttered it, you should stand with this man.
The message, "Je suis Charlie," I am Charlie, a slogan in support of Charlie Hebdo, the French satirical newspaper that mocked Islamic terrorists and repeatedly published cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad, the target of this week's massacre. It became the rallying cry of global condemnation of what demonstrators see as a direct attack on the freedom of speech.
What brings you here today?
Actually, we are today for hearing the first trial for the Mark Berberg emergency, actually assaulting emergency worker. Yeah, and that was last year in, I think, July. Yeah, 7th of July was that, and yeah, we'll see.
How did you plead?
Not guilty, 100%.
Today, I know there's another trial going on at the same time as you. I'm here for there's a man that burned the Quran, and he's standing trial today for that. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that. I wish you luck with yours, by the way.
Thank you so much. I wish him good luck as well, because we are in democracy, we are in freedom, you know. If we say we are free and this is a democracy, you shouldn't actually take one guy because of, you know, banning Quran, take them in the court, you know. It's my opinion. Thank you so much.
Good luck with your trial today.
You too. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I'm going to go back into the court. Unlike in America, where cameras are allowed in the courts and they televise everything, this camera is going to get confiscated, sadly. This is the British system. We don't really have a democracy here, in my opinion. I'm still waiting for that constitution rather than this higgledy-piggledy, lots of laws mashed together, and we don't really have any freedom of speech. We don't really know where we stand, and they make it up as they go along. And if you stand against the state, they will commit lawfare on you, as is what is happening today. But hopefully it all goes well for this chap. Hey man, good luck, by the way.
Well, you might notice the sunset. That means court is over, well, at least for now. The sad thing is this trial was expected to only last 2 or 3 hours, and we're now at 7 p.m. and there is still no verdict. Everyone's case has been presented, the defense, the prosecution. They had about 6 or 7 people there. Chief prosecutor. I think the whole thing is corrupt. I will say that for the record. I think the whole thing is corrupt. I'm not allowed to report on this until the trial is over, so this video is not going to go out until the trial is over. There potentially will be either a not guilty or a guilty tomorrow at 2 p.m. I will be in the air. I'm taking a flight, so I'm just going to have to hear about it from my second-hand news. Despite the fact that they're claiming he's not being prosecuted for burning the Quran, the prosecutor spent the entire time focused on the defendant's dislike for Islam. The man is of Kurdish Armenian background. Father's side Armenian, mother's side Kurdish. One side had experienced the Armenian genocide committed by the Turks, and the other side, the Kurds, still continue to be genocided. And you can understand why he has such disdain for Islam. A man shouldn't be guilty for burning a Quran or burning a book.
It's a rabbit hole down which I really hope we don't go as a society, because the consequences could be dire for expression.
So your platform is 1984 Today. You were in the courts all day today, along with myself, monitoring the trial of the man who burnt the Quran. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this trial. Obviously, this is going out once the verdict's out. The trial hasn't finished. What are your thoughts?
Without knowing the outcome, all I could really offer as an observation from today, without going into exhaustive detail, is that it seems the prosecution began from a charge that would not have held up in court, but given the choice between amending that charge to something that could potentially fly or dropping the case, they decided to push ahead. The result is that the arguments the prosecution were making in the courtroom tended to be relatively circular and or self-contradicting, in the sense that the prosecutor said several times, verbatim, simply burning the Quran is not a criminal offense. Simply voicing trenchant criticism of Islam is not a criminal offense. But in cross-examining the defendant and in the oral arguments that he gave, he made it clear that what he was hammering on was, in fact, the burning of the Quran in a public place, the use of no-no words in conjunction with Islam, and his perception, rather the Crown's perception, that the defendant knew full well he was going to upset people and in fact wanted to do that because of an animosity towards Muslims specifically. There doesn't seem to be any understanding given in the court so far as to whether animosity towards Muslims, if in fact that was the case, is illegal, or whether criticizing the religion of Islam is protected speech. I hope, as I'm sure other observers hope, that whatever decision the judge makes will clarify what the situation in Britain is.
It seems from an outsider's perspective, anyone that I've been speaking to, they're trying to bring in blasphemy laws under the radar, although it's clear because they changed the charges twice since the original charge, they're really not sure how to go about this. Do you think it's a case that the CPS is trying to save face and just hope for a win, or do you think they know what they're doing?
Well, I'm not necessarily going to accept the premise because I'm not 100% sure who the they you're proposing is. Mm-hmm. If the original charge, which was causing harassment, alarm, or distress to the religious institution of Islam had been allowed and had resulted in a conviction. The concern was that it would have created the legal person of the religious institution of Islam in English law that could then be insulted and seek redress, which would have been very problematic and resulted in, at the very least, a lot of squabbling over what amounts to blasphemy, whether or not it resulted in the punishment of people for it. That charge has been changed and split. And so now there's a simple offense of essentially disorderly conduct and a religiously aggravated offense of disorderly conduct because of hatred towards a protected group. Why the CPS decided to pursue that rather than either dropping the case or sticking to the original charge and taking their licks, I couldn't possibly say. Splitting the charge doubles their chances of success because one of them can hit and the other one can get tossed and they can still secure a win. It seems a little tricksy to be able to say, well, we want him on the simple charge and on the aggravated charge, and if we can't have the aggravated charge, we'll take the simple charge. It would be nice if the authorities had to decide what you did and stick to it, rather than gauging what you did based on the prospects of convicting you. So, without being a psychic, I can't fully answer your question, but what does seem to be the case is that this trial includes a lot of what seem to be the going concerns in British public discourse around the return of offense as a legislatable issue, blasphemy, so-called two-tier policing. Even in the arguments that were submitted, there was the example of the campaign against anti-Semitism losing a case because what was said about, quote, Zionists, for example, was deemed not problematic, even though it was said at a protest that was much larger than Hamit Coskun alone in the street. There seems to be a lot wrapped up in this that requires resolution to reassure the public that Britain is still a country that protects speech and thought in law and not just in word.
If a member of the public lashes out in violence, then the person burning the Quran is immediately guilty. That seems to be the angle they're going for on this second or third charge, or am I mistaken?
The logic that the prosecution seemed to be using is that speech that might otherwise be protected, that is theoretically offensive enough and produces in another person or persons a response that can be characterized as disorderly, can then be attached to the speaker as them causing the disorder. So Coskun is effectively accused of public disorder, but the disorder, one can argue, in fact, was that he was physically attacked and accosted for yelling obscenities about Islam in the street and burning a copy of the Quran. The prosecution is arguing that the obscenities he yelled and the burning of the Quran are inherently inflammatory, and him knowing that and wanting to make Muslims angry makes it a public order offense, whereas one could also make the argument that violence in response to speech is only the, quote, consequence, end quote, of that speech, if one is accepting a priori that the degree to which someone is offended and the degree to which their beliefs are closely held, regardless of how reasonable they are, is an acceptable excuse for their behavior that attaches to someone who violates the boundaries they've decided on. In simpler language, that a believer who has boundaries drawn by concern over blasphemy reacting to what they consider blasphemy is a crime attaching to a non-believer. That would be the characterization, as I understand it, from the free speech union that are sharing the expense of the defense. And if that logic is allowed through, if in practice saying something that draws a violent response is deemed a disorderly act, because if there is disorder after you speak, your speech was a disorder, was a cause of disorder, I think that can only chill speech in Britain in an absolute sense. And I'm talking about even the people who in this particular trial might feel that their boundaries are being respected. Whether the prosecution will be successful or not remains to be seen. And I have my own opinions on the situation, but generally I found myself quite aghast at watching a prosecutor in an English courtroom hold a copy of the Quran up and essentially accuse a man who set it on fire of blasphemy using other words, simply by defending the fact that while Josh Kuhn suggested that the Quran contains problematic passages, that there were other passages in it that weren't problematic, so why burn the whole book? As if him burning only the passages that bothered him wouldn't have drawn violence. It's a rabbit hole down which I really hope we don't go as a society, because the consequences could be dire for expression, in my opinion.
No, it was almost like the prosecutor was saying, why have you not started the Reformation? That's kind of the angle he was going. Why are you not sat there like an Islamic scholar editing out the problematic verses? That's not his place to do. He's enraged by the suffering his family have undergone under the Islamists. He's been persecuted under the Islamists, and he doesn't like Islam. That's not a crime.
You've said that whether or not he likes Islam, in quotations, isn't a crime. Unfortunately,
in this country,
the outcome of this trial is going to decide that.
On June 2nd, 2025, Hamit Coskun was found guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court of intentionally causing religiously aggravated harassment, alarm or distress under Section 4A of the Public Order Act. What did he do? He burnt a Quran during a peaceful protest. He hurt no one. He threatened no one. He merely expressed dissent, visibly, symbolically, and non-violently. Yet in today's Britain, that's enough to get you dragged through the courts. And here's the part that should chill every citizen to the bone. The only violence that occurred that day came from others, from those attacking him. One man slashed Koskin's hand with a sharp object that can't be named because the judge says don't call that object what it really is. Another, a delivery rider, kicked him while he lay on the ground. Koskin was a victim of mob aggression, but the state made him the criminal. And what was his sentence? A fine. A financial punishment for an opinion. This wasn't about justice. This was about setting a precedent, about warning every Brit, protest Islam publicly and the state will come for you. Judge John McGarva didn't defend peace today. He didn't preserve justice. He weaponized the courts to send a message. You are no longer free to offend a protected ideology. Let's say it plainly. Britain is being murdered, not with bombs, but with courtroom decisions, with judges who served ideology over principle, with lawfare used to force every Brit into silence, into submission, into fear. This is no longer the land of free speech, if it ever was. This is a country where you must tiptoe in public, lest you provoke the wrath of the imported orthodoxy, enforced by the corrupt crown. We live under a two-tier justice system. Mock Christianity, that's called free speech, they say. Burn the Bible, well, that's art. Criticize Islam, you'll be in court, son. This is not equality, this is capitulation, and the British people must now choose. We either accept this slow death of our liberty or we push back, peacefully but powerfully against those who are dismantling our once beautiful country from within. This is a call to arms, not with fists, not with guns, but with words, with votes, with truth. Rid the judiciary of cowardice. Remove the corrupt politicians who have sold us out. Reclaim Britain before it's gone. Because once free speech falls, and it does look that way, Britain falls with it. If you appreciate this content, click the subscribe button. If you like this video, click the like button, leave a comment, and maybe share this with someone worthy. And I'll see you in the next video. Keep progressing.